Welcome back. I'm Connie Sokol, your host of Call to Create, and today it is such a delight, especially if you're an artist, but as any creative, you're going to learn some great tips and tools from an amazing artist. We have Kathy Fincher in the house. Hello, Kathy. Thanks for being with us.
Good morning, everybody. How are you? Well, it may not be morning where you are, but it's in North Georgia, it's morning.
There you go. And I'm telling you, she is a painter of light. So it's going to be morning this entire interview. I can tell you that, talking about light. I'm going to give the usual official bio introduction, but oh man, I can't wait till you learn from this woman who went from water skiing and freestyle snow skiing to being a mother to being a painter later in life, and then becoming so award-winning and decorated, and even being able to present a painting to the president in the Oval Office. So let's get started. Kathy Fincher creates meaningful artwork that moves the soul. She is renowned for her Norman Rockwell style paintings of children. Classically trained, her attention to details and lighting have earned her many international awards. Fincher's painting, The Dream Keepers, was presented to the president in the Oval Office and later inducted into the permanent collection of the G.B. Bush Presidential Library. For the city of Duluth, Georgia, Fincher designed the Dream Keepers 9/11 Memorial, featuring 7 children using their handprints to restore the American flag encased in glass and aged brick. Her greatest work to date is the monumental bronze of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., where she captures his premonition of death with his eyes longing for heaven. Can't wait till we get to that part as well. But let's just jump in to the beginnings, because you kind of had this Tom Sawyer childhood that you would not imagine this award-winning international artist. Tell us about what that did to influence your painting, and how that maybe contributed to this joyful childhood feel to what you do.
I will, and I hope that I encourage moms to let their kids have some freedom outdoors. So our family owned and ran the general store. Every relative worked in the store. We used to say, if we ain't got it, you don't need it. It was dry goods, hardware, lumber, groceries. So my parents were obviously gone all the time. So the 3 daughters of the owners, who all 3 worked in the stores, their husbands had housekeepers who watched the kids. My 2 cousins had the sweetest housekeeper. My 4 brothers and I had Ethel, and Ethel was lethal. And as soon as my parents left, she knew the only way to keep the house clean was for her to be inside and my 4 brothers and I to be outside. So we basically were locked outside. And I know what you're thinking, child abuse, but in the 50s, we just called it playing outside. And so I had a horses, and without an adult supervision, I had the most exciting life. I rode my horse everywhere. We built tree houses and forts. And when the Methodist Church had their building project next door, we expanded our tree house. We said, thank you for the materials from the Methodist. And we created tree houses with swings from one to the other. And it was incredibly creative. We built forts. And when I would find chips of glass, I would create tiles and designs. And when my aunt next door, who was an artist also, would come home, whatever project I was creating, whether I was creating a floor plan for a house in the woods, she would jump in. My mother would jump in. And so this creative spirit was whatever I made it. It had to be creative too in sports to get along and play with all the boys.
Yes. Yes.
And that's one reason I became such an athlete, was because there was no adult telling me, Kathy, the ball is going to come right to you. I didn't have that. It was just get the ball and run or be killed, you know. So it was a great upbringing. And when I was 14, I was walking out the front door of the house, and my mother stopped me. I had my shirt off, and the next door I walked into is an all-girl boarding school. My parents could see that I needed to be around other girls. And so I went to a school in Gainesville, Georgia called Burnell Academy. That was instrumental to my art because I met my best friend, Jenny, who had a horse, who had 3 brothers, and she lived in the town where the school was. How many kids go away to boarding school in the same town they live in? But she did. And a block away was her mother's Renaissance art studio. Her mother studied at the Louvre in Paris and had a 5-year waiting list to take art from her. But when I met her, she took me as a student right away, thinking that she could lure her daughter in, which, worked for about 4 times. But I studied through the classics and the Renaissance art, ground made my own paints. I sketched from life in high school and college with charcoal. We had plasters. We had to do things in sequence. Marie Antoinette, the human body without the skin, all the muscles, the horse, everything was taught the way Leonardo da Vinci taught, Michelangelo taught. She taught the same thing to me. Every piece was a masterpiece, but I did not fall in love with art. It was way too disciplined. But I fell in love with what her brothers taught me, which was to snow ski. And so that's where the snow skiing started. And later I was asked to teach skiing, and that involved and went all the way to starting the first freestyle school in the Southeast. And so for 5 years, I was a ski instructor and started an exhibition team and a freestyle school.
And it's incredible to me because I just see this thread through what you do, that whatever aspect you're engaged in, you are fully present and you are going, let's do this. And you succeed incredibly in each of those areas. You're skiing, water skiing, snow skiing, whatever it is that you've turned your attention to. So I find it so interesting that you're getting all these pieces and not seeing where it's going to lead you. It's just like, I'm here and I'm loving this.
No.
I'm here and I'm loving this.
That's right.
And yet, it seems like you're learning to be disciplined, to notice things, to be quick to observe, quick to pick things up.
I would say that would be true.
Yeah, let's move to a little bit of how that all started to
Well,
come.
I'm just going to tell you one thing about
go
that because it fits in with what you said. I fell in love with snow skiing so much that every night in my mind, I skied. And I felt like, what was it like to transition the edges? And I'd be contorting in bed, skiing. And it was after I'd only skied less than a year that I was asked to teach. So I was all in. I was all in. And in water skiing, we grew up on skis. Our family, although they worked hard together, we knew how to play together. And every weekend after church, we spent our time on the lake. And we were all water skiers. We were taught to water ski at an early age. And they started a show ski there. So we tried out and made the show team. And that's how I started my professional show skiing and was made the U.S. team because I could go off the ski jump when women couldn't. So yes, you're right. I was completely engaged. And I thought my calling, my God-given calling, was in sports because I was being successful in that.
And there you go. I love that point that you make because sometimes as creatives, we go, oh, well, that must be where I play. And
That's
I know
right.
you're a faith-based woman, but as faith-based people, we feel like we look for that. We look for that.
We do.
Wow, I'm being successful. And especially when you are so immersive in something, you're like, wow, this must be where I'm playing. And then all of a sudden, the gear will either switch for you or you'll switch a gear and you'll think, now
That's
wait,
right.
what about now? Did you ever feel that when after the skiing, the water skiing, all that, and then you're switching a gear later on with the art?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There was a moment that gear switched. And what happened is I was 33. I met this wonderful man and I decided it was time to break up with him because he was too nice. He just had this, he would bring me flowers. He didn't play it cool. And so the night that I decided to break up with him, we were sitting on the sofa and he said something. And I said, oh, you're just so nice. And he looked at me and he goes, Kathy, it takes strength to give. And when he said that, I went, what has happened to me? How worldly have I come? How could I lose sight of this? And so I married him.
Oh,
And, but I was second in the nation in trick skiing and I was ready to keep it going, but God has a sense of humor. I got pregnant on my honeymoon and I did not want children.
I was going to say, even from a young age, you were like, nah.
No, did not want children. Before the dust settled, there was another one. I played in the USTA state tennis finals in labor and I didn't know it. And my husband was away and he got there in time, 15 minutes before the baby was born. But you would think that would change me, but I was still ready to get back into my sports. I mean, I went through the bonding, but after a while, because motherhood is hard. It's hard. Water skiing is easy. And I was ready to get back to that. And my husband was like, I want you to be a mom. And I took a Bible study on Kay Arthur, and I realized God had given me this gift of children. And that I have 4 generations of women that ran stores. They did not stay home with us. But I realized that God was telling me to let go of who I thought I was so he could show me who he knew me to be.
Gorgeous.
Hardest thing I ever did. And so, I mean, let go of my identity, let go of my ego, and just have this fresh palette that's blank for God. And I did it. And I let go. And I will tell you, I was miserable for a while. And then I started learning. I started seeing my children taking steps and their teeth falling out and coming in, and meeting other parents with kids the same age as ours. I realized going off a ski jump was easy. And I absolutely, for the first time, fell in love with the art of motherhood. And I fell in love with being a mother. So my mother jumped in on that and she said, well, now do you have time to paint? And my aunt goes, well, now do you have time to paint? And so I started back with the Renaissance art and working with the old masters, and I still wasn't allowed to use color. Oh. And we met this man who's done a medium called the dry pastels. And that is when I fell in love with art. I was able to make it up, create, my mother and my aunt beside me, and we all just created. I've said, I can use whatever color I want. Yes. I can do anything I want. Yes. And we did landscapes. And some of my landscapes were noticed by a publisher while they were being framed. And I was called, and the publisher came to my home and I signed a contract. So they sold my landscapes. Now, this is the next level of change. I told you I did not want children. My mother told me from the time I was young, you were meant to paint faces. You were meant to paint faces. And a friend of mine was visiting. I said, my mother wants me to paint our daughter. Here, I've sketched it. You paint the kid. I'll do the background. We'll hang it in the nursery and make my mother happy. So we did. So she painted the face. I painted the background. You can see the painting on my website. It's called Ladybug, of our oldest daughter. Well, my publisher visited, saw the painting on the wall, took a picture of it. And the next thing I knew, she was handing me a contract to do a children's calendar. I said, you have a problem. I don't paint children. She says, well, the company is called Current, the largest publisher in the world. To replace the #1 children's painter in the world, Donald Zolan, which thankfully I didn't know either of them were. I'm getting given a calendar and I don't paint faces. And so she said, well, you do now. This is a great contract. And
Great.
so we have one painting, and I said, well, I didn't even paint this. And so about a couple of weeks later, I said, it's impossible to do 12 images. You know, there's a deadline with a calendar, right? You know, it does come with a deadline. And so they said, well, we found another artist whose work is very similar to hers. If she does 6 images and you do 6 images, then we'll put them together and we'll make the deadline. Do you know who the other artist was? The one who did the face. She was from South Florida.
No.
Yes, they found my friend Laurie Hine. I mean, is that not? And she is a portrait painter.
Oh my goodness.
And you know what? I said, let her do all of them. they said, no, too good a contract. So I started doing some paintings of kids from the back and submitting them. And then they said, no, we want full face. We want full face. I hadn't really painted a full face. I could draw. So I literally got down on my knees at my easel. And I said, I do not want to do this. I don't want to paint these faces. God, you're going to have to help me. I have no desire to do this. I don't even know how to paint a child's face. And it's like a voice came back and said, well, it's thick lines, it's thin lines, it's dark colors, it's light colors. There's only three colors, three primary colors. If one doesn't work, try another one. You know, just like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. And so I started doing this face. The image is called First Look. And I covered as much of the face as I could. I put the child behind a window, had a big scarf on and a hat and a tree and snow on the window. And as I started doing the face, I realized that one little shadow around the mouth or anywhere changed the entire expression. And it was magical. Just one little touch and the face changed. And I fell in love with painting faces. So I studied and came up with my own way to paint children's faces. And after the third year, they came back to me and they said, we want just you. We want you to be the solo artist. And the reason I have so many children's paintings is because I had to do 12 every year. And so I became the most licensed children's painter in America. And each level of paintings evolved. Like I did a painting called Here's the Church, Here's the Steeple. And I realized the need with praise music, the need to keep the traditional music that generations could sing together and the important role a child has in the church. And so I did a whole series of children in church. So that's always been my motivation. Something happens and I feel called to do a collection of some sort.
I think the thing that stands out to me so much in all of this journey is that it kept being this unexpected path to get
Yeah.
where you were really called to go, and not having the context to see where he was actually taking you, but your willingness to submit and learn something new, to be open. And even if it was kind of dragging you, half dragging you, being able to go, okay, I can do this much. All right, I can do this little bit. And then once you got a taste of it, then he was like, see what I'm talking about. And then you asked for the help and the skills and the tools to say, okay, make me equal to this, instead of
You
that's
ask.
not my wheelhouse, right? That's not what I do.
People will ask me, what is your number one motivation? And they think that I'm going to say, oh, it's my faith. My number one motivation, the reason I create so much art, is a contract and a deadline.
Amen.
When my back is against a wall is when I do my best. And I bet there's a lot of artists out there that feel the same way. When I started painting children, my publisher would only publish images here and there. So when I started deciding who I was going to be as an artist, what my style would be, I had a board meeting with myself. And I sat down at a big board table and I put all the images of children that I loved. And I started just pulling things away. What did I want to do? Now, if I'm going to be doing calendars every year, who am I as a children's painter? What do I want to do? And I ended up with three images on the table. First, Norman Rockwell. I have to have personality. It's got to tell a story. It'll be a subtle story. It has to tell a story. The second one was an artist called Bess P. Scootman, who was a German artist from the 40s and 50s that painted very soft and pastel angelic children. And you can go back. Matter of fact, I saw her artwork on my birth certificate years later. Is that not amazing? So that was meant to be. So you can Google Bess P. Scootman and you'll recognize her art. And I thought a Norman Rockwell story, but with a softer, more feminine version painting children. But the third one was my most important, and that was Michelangelo. And I was a huge fan of Agony and the Ecstasy and the way his mind worked. And I had been fortunate enough where my husband was a protege for a man who wrote the textbook on early Christian art and architecture. So for 2 different times, we went a month at a time, and we went through Greece and Turkey and Italy. and studied all of the old masters through the man who wrote the textbook on early Christian art.
Mm.
And so I realized how important it was that I have iconography in my paintings, that my paintings be able to talk to people from all walks of life, and especially angels, and how angels were painted. But backing up, it was the story of Michelangelo sculpting David. And so I don't know if you know the background, but there was a competition. And so all these different artists, because there was this huge piece of marble, Carrara marble, had one flaw in it in the middle, and they were competing for this perfect piece of marble. So one sculptor showed Michelangelo as the athlete, and his muscles are ripping, and that was his design. Another showed him as the conqueror, and then another is a victor with the head up in the air and the foot on the head, and they all of these things. And Michelangelo said, is that the heart of the story? What is the heart of the story between David and the battle with Goliath? And so he studied, he said, well, David's hands were large because as a youth, he could kill the bear and the lion. And so when you see it, he has very large hands. He was young. He has to be youthful, but he was also athletic. And he had a very, very strong faith. So he thought, you know, the most important thing in that battle was the moment of decision.
Mm.
The moment that David said, my God is bigger than you. And so if you look at the sculpture, you'll see his eyes are saying now, and his body is relaxed, and his hand is relaxed because it's the moment of decision where his body is just about to take out Goliath, but it's the moment of decision was the most important part of that. And so is that not a powerful story? So I thought in my own paintings, it's not going to be a child smiling. I'll let you, the viewer, decide. Is that child going to reach in to grab that goldfish? Is that child going to give up that bunny? I wanted the child to be more on the brink of a discovery, the moment of decision, not where it was just like a portrait. It had to have movement. It had to make you, the viewer, become a participant. So that's how I decided that every painting I do of children, am I satisfying all three of those things? I encourage your viewers to have that same board meeting with themselves and do a collection of art, whatever it is. If it's flowers, decide and study other people and who do you want to be? So I really encourage, because that certainly gave me a target, and that's how where I am in art.
Absolutely gorgeous. I love how you laid that out because it does shift the feel and the experience for the participant, for the viewer. I've seen the statue of David, and I never knew before that you could feel a feeling from a sculpture. There is, just like you said, that relaxed feeling. And there's this like a knowing that
Right.
comes off of that sculpture. Same thing with your paintings where you call it that brink of discovery. I love that phrase because there's this childhood anticipation and moment of adventure, excitement, of possibility that you capture in your paintings. And for those that are able to have that collaborative experience with the participant, the audience, whatever it might be, what is one tool that you've used to be able to capture that? Because you do a lot with light. You even with the guardian, you thought about, no, the angel needs to be under the bridge and to
Right.
protect them from walking through the slats. And
Right.
there's a lot of thought that goes into it.
Absolutely.
Is it more the thought before it, or is it the colors and the way you're using them, or maybe a hybrid, a combination of both?
So it's all of them. If I can't tell a story, I won't use it. But I'm going to jump forward to the Martin Luther King quickly. This monument is over 8 feet high, and he is looking up, and he is designed such that his eyes catch the light and his hand catches the light as he talks to God with the open Bible that catches the light. So like you're saying, this is the first monument of Martin Luther King talking to God. And it's his mountaintop speech. I've been to the mountaintop. I've looked over. I've seen the promised land. Who else was allowed to see the promised land? and to have a vision of his people walking through the promised land is
Right.
Moses. So his Bible is open to the same chapter of Moses. And what's amazing is I had access to two really important things that I still can't believe that I was able to use. One was I contacted Alveda King and I said, Alveda King, I would love a pastor's robe so I can get the detail from it. Do you know of someone? She said, come to my home. Okay. So I drove to South Atlanta and she says, be careful with it. It's over 100 years old. I said, who did it belong to? She said, Martin Luther King's father. And here we had the father's robe, and just amazing to have that. The other thing was I called a museum that had the brother's Bible. And you may remember his brother marched with him. His brother was also murdered. So they would have had the same Bible. And so I said, open the Bible to the last chapter of Deuteronomy, take a picture of it so I can make the Bible like authentic. You will not believe what was in that Bible. And I hopefully will be able to show a photograph of it. The chapter where Moses dies has a red star. But more importantly, you know how the Bibles have a ribbon and we marker, and I put a ribbon on our Bible. The ribbon was marked permanently on that page.
Mm.
The stain of the ribbon was on that page. The Bible was shut and put away since how many years? With the ribbon marking the exact page that we would sculpt 2 years ago of his brother talking to God. Now that, I don't even know where to put that. I don't even know where to put that in life. But you can see the picture of the stain. So this Bible is opened with those two things we have for it. But if you think about it, his doctorate robe, which you'll see in the art, melts into a Moses type robe. And Martin Luther King says, I know we will get there. He sees his people enter the promised land like Moses. And amazing, Moses dies after he sees the promised land. Martin Luther King is murdered the next morning. His final sentence, which very few people know, is, mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. And that's what I sculpted. And his eyes in his hand. And I was asked, what made him a great man? Because this is going to go in a Nobel Peace Pantheon. Why did he receive a Nobel Peace Prize? And I studied and researched every monument of Martin Luther King in the world. And I came to the conclusion, he always had his Bible nearby, and he always used scripture. He had the incredible ability to articulate. He was a preacher. And he had a flock that stayed and held him up through his years. He was a preacher. It was his faith that made him a great man. And this piece of art would show that. And they were going to make me change it and lower his head and make him preaching. And I told a wonderful man of God, Clyde Strick, and I said, Clyde, he said, why'd you change it? I said, Clyde, they made me. I said, but if you want to keep our story, you need to sponsor this piece of art. And the next morning he said, well, I found this wad of money. And so he sponsored it. And for the unveiling, he brought churches around the globe together. And the unveiling of this piece of art was the World Peace Revival. It was a revival. And you
And
can
that
go
was,
online and see it.
yes, they had
And
like
it
a
was meant to
billion
be one.
prayers for peace and
It
acts of
did.
service. And
Yes.
look at what all of this catapulted, what it inspired. That is incredible. And the collaboration, these bits and pieces that were so meant to be of, I think this is so important for a creative to realize that even when you have a commission or a project or a
Right.
piece or something you're working on, you don't do it alone. You ask for
Don't.
divine help. And then the Alveda King robe and the Bible and the Clyde
Right.
and all these people coming in, and
That's
that
right.
to me is
Well,
how
the
it
National Monuments Foundation who commissioned me, it was done by the National Monuments Foundation. I had a sculptor I was working with, and amazing that they switched me to work with a different sculptor who is a man of God. And the one that I was working with complained about everything that had to do with the wind represents the spirit,
The
that's
book
important.
represents the Holy Ghost.
Yes. And here I was put with a man of God who was all over this. And we worked in his studio, Stan Mullins. Thank you, Stan.
Incredible. I see this, the hand of the Lord in each of these steps. And again, this thread that runs through it that I hadn't seen before, but in this conversation, this willingness, this asking. You've done your homework, you've researched, you've found things so that you have good information to receive good inspiration. You have all of these pieces, and then God has more to add to it, to fill in all these gaps, to keep this moving in the way that it needs to be for this beautiful fruition in this incredible statue. I can't even imagine. You have had incredible moments, incredible success as these creatives are listening to you, and you have had these experiences of being submitting, being willing to try new things, letting it add to your tool belt, your repertoire, being able to meet these people and work with all these different people and produce incredible works. Is there any bit of advice that you have for these creatives as you turn back and look at this unexpected life that's been so nourishing and so productive? Is there any bit of advice that you would give to them?
Absolutely. Well, you started out talking about fear, and it's very difficult for me because when I do a piece of art, my publishers, whoever I'm doing the art for, they expect the next one to be even better and better. And the expectations become so high. And it makes me very fearful to start a piece of art. Now, I would think you have a lot of people that are afraid, and that's why the deadline is very helpful. But I will go into a piece of art and I'll do all my research. The research is fun and easy because that doesn't involve anything. So I have all of my materials and research, but literally starting that piece of art, I'll put it off. I'll clean my house. I'll do my yard. I'll go pull weeds. I'll do anything because I'm afraid I'll fail. And what I will tell your audience is that what I'll do is I'll put my things out and I'll say, today I'm going to do this. I will do my design from cut and piecing. Today I will just get my sketch done or part of my sketch. Then I'll do this tomorrow. And then what happens is all of your fears start dissolving and you slowly become so focused that you disappear into your piece of art and your decision making and what you do. And then you'll step back from it because I walk a mile with each painting. I'll step back and I'll go, wow, or this needs that. But a painter's like looking in your backyard. You can show me your backyard and I'll go, it's beautiful. And you'll go, but that piece of crabgrass over there. Well, that's what artists do. They'll look at that. And so a lot of times what I'll do is I will take the emotion out and I'll look at my art when I think I'm done with it. And I'll pretend somebody else painted it. I'll go, okay, somebody else did this. Now, what do you think? And it will change my opinion of the piece of art. When people say, how do you come up with your subject matter? Always be willing to change your mind if you can. I'm very fortunate that I was able to paint what I wanted to paint, pretty much. And so when I do a photo shoot, I use real children. And when I go and I get on the floor, because you always want to photograph under the eyelashes. You want to make sure you get their eyes. And so when I'll have an agenda, this is what I'm going to paint. I'm going to do this and they're going to be doing it. I'll get on the floor with the child. And when I stand up, it's a different painting altogether. So you can't out-kid a kid. So there's so much you can learn just from children. And the same would be true with anything. So I hope those are helpful tips for your audience.
Absolutely gorgeous. I love that thought of fear dissolves in the doing. You
It
just
does. Absolutely.
and you'll get so immersed and focused that you won't be thinking about the fear. You'll be thinking about how do I solve this particular issue or problem? Absolutely love. These tips today have been fantastic. Have a board meeting with yourself, collaborate with others, invite the divine, and then be open to changing, be
That's
open to submitting and willing to learn a new tool or skill that you didn't want and that you didn't
right.
anticipate and see where it takes you. Absolutely gorgeous. Now, I know that people are going to want to reach out to you, and your website is fabulous. In fact, she has before and afters of the photo shoots of pictures of the children and then how it transforms
Right.
into the
Mhm.
painting. It's so beautiful. But
Yeah.
what's the best way for people to reach you?
Well, the best way would be to go to my website, www.kathyfincher.com. I made it real easy. Kathy Fincher.com. You can send me an email. You can ask me questions. And I hope you'll take time. The videos, I believe, are helpful. My niece, who is a wonderful videographer, forced me to do a video. So you may enjoy that because it shows the snow skiing and the water skiing. And it's really the testimony. I do quite a bit of speaking engagements and I share my faith. And I feel so blessed to be able to do that. And I also feel blessed to be with publishers that would give me art samples that, or artist proofs, they call them, where I've been able to give back to the community. So I hope that your artists can find a way to do the same, to give back their talent and encourage others along. I really get upset with people that hide their secrets or whatever. And I believe that it's important to be able to share. Hopefully, I'll be doing a book called A Brush with Faith and show my techniques because the way I paint children, it's taken a lot of study to figure it out. So thank
And
you so much for having me to
you
share
are
this.
so welcome. I love that attitude because that is so what the Lord wants us to do as we do all this learning and sharing and creating. And then we pass the baton and we say, this is what I've learned. Now add to it. And then you
Absolutely.
add to that and pass that on. And that's where we flourish one another. That is living the gospel. I just love this. Kathy, it's been a pure delight today. So much learning and watching the hand of the Lord in your life, and look at what beauty it has produced that will keep blessing generations to come. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. Good luck, audience. You'll do a great job. Don't be afraid. Go
Isn't
for it.
she a delight? And I got to tell you, that video is fabulous. It has real live pictures. Well, real pictures of her going off the ski jump and everything. So fantastic. I hope that you got some fabulous things out of this today, my fellow creatives.
Thank you.
And as always, if you love this interview, you can check out all the other interviews we have with other people, all the way from Dr. Stacey Taniguchi, who's climbing Mount Everest, to Gerald Lund, to all the people who are doing these beautiful things where they have felt called to create.